thank you all for coming out. I recognize some faces from the listening session, so thank you for making the time to come again, or those of you who haven't been with us before, thank you so much for coming to our reveal. This is the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition's Affordable Housing Charrette. We want to start out by thanking our sponsors, New Hampshire Housing, and then a number of other amazing sponsors that have helped make this event possible, including Huggins Hospital, Costantino Real Estate, Maine Health at Memorial Hospital, Union Bank, Cooper Cargill Chant, White Mountain Board of Realtors, Pinkham Real Estate, and as you can see, many more. All right, the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are an advocacy organization that works on strengthening community and economy through advocacy and promoting affordable housing, workforce housing in the Mount Washington Valley. My name is Sarah Butterfield. I'm the executive director, and our board is made up of these individuals who are passionate housing advocates. Could everyone on the board please raise your hand who's here? Excellent. Thanks for being here, guys. Just to recap, a charrette is an intensive planning session where citizens, planners, and other housing industry professionals collaborate on a vision for development. While the property is real, the exercise is hypothetical. So this is a hypothetical project, not anything that's in the works currently. We want to thank the County Lands and Annex Subcommittee. The Carroll County delegation voted last year to appoint the Lands Committee to recommend future uses for the county's 800 plus acres. And we have a few folks here tonight. I have Representative Mark McConkey. Can you raise your hand? Great, thank you. Representative Richard Brown, Representative David Page, and County Commissioner Bill Nelson. Thanks for being here, and thank you for inviting us. Just a little understanding of how the process works is the Lands and Annex Subcommittee makes a recommendation to the commissioners. The commissioners can then either advance that recommendation or not to the delegation, and the delegation would vote on a project. All right, these are the folks on our design team. It's a whole group of professionals in the housing industries. Thank you all so much for being here. It's been really exciting to watch you work today. Can everyone go ahead and raise your hand? I think we have a couple folks in the audience as well. Okay, amazing. Thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Josh to start out.
I'm going to stand up in the middle because I like to pace and walk around while I talk, so you'll just have to bear with that. So I wanted to sort of the master of ceremonies here and try to summarize what we did in 8 or 9 hours in a very brief description so that everybody can understand where we're at. The first How about now? All right. The first thing that we did was spend time taking a look at what we learned in our last two listening sessions, last night and the one at Tuckerman's 2 days ago. We listened to your messages and your concerns and the things you're excited about, which were all listed on all these sheets, and we started to define what the guardrails are for our design process. As you can see up there, we wanted to protect the prime agricultural areas. We wanted to make sure that we didn't touch the existing water and sewer resources that exist for the county land and the people that surround the area. We heard that you wanted different types of housing and different mixes of affordability. We heard that you wanted opportunities for future services like daycare for either the residents here or county staff or people that live and work in the area. We wanted the building design to highlight the local character. Energy efficiency was in the conversation. Definitely no second homeowners, which we can all appreciate, and have opportunities for transitional housing. Our next step after we went through all of that is we took a deep dive into the OSFI zoning regulations. We identified some pinch points in the regulations that may impact the ability to develop affordably In this community, and it's no different in any other community, we have to take a look at where there are some restricting factors in those zoning regulations that we may have to relax as part of this activity. Some of those things that we immediately identify are density. It's a simple calculation. The more units we can get for the least amount of infrastructure constructed is how we can get closer to make a project affordable. So we started off our conversation by looking at density. So within this property in itself is in the rural area or the rural zone for Ossipee, which has a 2-acre minimum lot size, and with some other considerations and factors based on soil type. And we were immediately looking at about 420 acres of the county land. It's about 460, including the county infrastructure. So we were taking about 40 acres off and leaving the county infrastructure and existing development alone. And we were looking at about 420 acres of land outside of that. And within the current zoning regulations in Ossipee, we could get about 211 units on that 422 acres. We also took a look at the cluster development ordinance in Ossipee that allows for a more detailed or more higher density 10,000 square foot lots with lot coverages of 50%, and looked at what we could do to apply that to this area. And essentially, that led us to looking at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services lot loading for septic design as another alternative for density. So if we went beyond the Ossipee regulations and went right to the state regulations for lot loading for septic design, on the 422 acres, we would have a capacity of about 346 units. And that takes into consideration soil types, that takes into consideration slopes of the land, developability of the land, and so on. Further to that, we had 2 other parcels of land, one 15 acres and one 36 acres, that had additional development, or that we could consider for development as well, that could add about either 26 total units in the normal density calculations for the rural district, or another 42 units if we started looking at the state lot loading. So overall, with those additional lots just off of the 422, we were looking at close to or up to 388 units on the county land, which is a large number. And when you start working through an affordable or a housing charrette, and you're trying to make things affordable, the larger that number is to start, the better it sounds as you're working your way back, trying to do the math of how much things cost and so on and so forth. So starting with 388 units on 422 acres was a good starting point, we felt, to think our way through. We conducted a site walk several days ago, and we've taken a look at the maps that we have available to us. And while they're 422 acres, we identified about 60 acres of developable land. There was a large swath of land that goes through the middle of the site with access of Water Village Road that would require a bridge to get to. Once you start constructing a bridge, it impacts your affordability. So any areas that we had to get to utilizing really expensive infrastructure, we kind of carved off. So we looked at parcels of land that were easily accessible off of Route 128 or Water Village Road. And that led us to about 60 acres of land that we were going to focus our development onto. And you can see that once you start looking at 422 acres and narrow it down to 60, maybe we're not talking about 388 units again, because then you start saying, all right, well, we got this really high density, but what can we really fit? And so that's where our design activities continued through. So while we look through all of that, we have an amazing architect and landscape architect with us here, Mike Achor and Bob White, that went through and started looking at what could we lay out in these areas. And I'm going to let Mike talk about the layout of the area and how we programmed that, and then I'll let Bob go into some of the finer details of the housing and homes that we're looking to put on those areas.
Hey, everyone. So lot in question right here. First thing we did was blocked off about 20 acres. That is the county property or county-used area. The next area we identified as buildable for us is off Route 28. There's about 20 acres in here. That kind of makes sense as a developable area, or at least we thought so when we started. And the other area that we looked at is up off of, forget the name of this road, sorry. Yeah, thank you. And there's about 40 acres in this area here. What we're trying to do is stay out of the prime agricultural land, obviously out of wetlands, and came up with this area in here. This block is this area up here. Another consideration we have is road costs are extremely expensive. So, the minimizing the road, still being able to get an access or two accesses to the property. We came up with this layout. Up against this area here, we identified about 72 buildable envelopes. I wouldn't call them lots, but they're buildable envelopes where we could do anything from a single family to a fourplex. And then we looked at it, we also identified a little area where we could do a childcare, playground, etc. And then on the other side of the house that's over here, we identified an area where we could do more what we're calling kind of like cottage, single family, small. Some of them you park and walk on a path to them. Some of them you've got direct access from your vehicle to them. A bunch of them are single family. Some of them could be duplexes. So that's where we came up there. And if I take this one, is this lower area right here. And what we initially came up with here is this could be a great place for a development of fourplexes right off Route 28. Working with the grades in here, that's kind of, we've managed to fit 10 units, 10 buildings, 40 units.
To walk through some of our rationale and also to give you a little eye candy about things that we think might be nice characterization. Because I think one of the things that we heard from you all on both evenings was just relative to the housing is we do not want an urban solution for housing here. We'd really like to have a solution of housing to be really fitting the context of the town of Ossipee and your areas of historical settlement, and really have it feel like more of it sort of grows organically out of Ossipee rather than some kind of idea from somewhere else. So that's been a part. And I just did want to note that when we do the cluster development option and we take density from the entire property and then we condense it, what happens is we then are allowed to use the higher density requirements that are in the village district. So we can have 10,000 square foot lots, and we have a maximum of 4 units per parcel. So when you look at some of our plans here, like this one, so these basically represent 10,000 acre parcels. It might not ever be subdivided like that, but we just wanted to be able to sort of quantify that we're in touch with sort of some conditions of the local zoning. Other things we need to have a little discussion about, and we'll be seeking perhaps some relief on that. So this is what you're seeing here is basically an allocation of space for dwelling units that can be single family, 2 family, up to 4 family, or 4 unit arrangements. But what we're trying to do is also match that up with a neighborhood-like feeling. And so some of the things that you'll see here, so we're just looking at the original origins of the rural district, have 2-acre lots. It's basically sort of it's really more, 2-acre lots are really more of a suburban pattern that's over the countryside. But then when we go, and then we can start to compress that to a 1-acre lot. And then what we did was we then took and said, okay, what's a 10,000 square foot lot like, and how can we make that be a part of a neighborhood? And that's where we get this, some of this opportunity that you see in the site plan. What's on the screen and what's over here is also in here. So what we wanted to do was to have, so back up one. So this is basically a neighborhood pattern of houses, and I call them big house, little house, back house, barn, sort of the extended farmhouse that is classic around the entire New England landscape, in both community settings as well as in rural settings. So that pattern is sort of a string of buildings, one that faces sort of a neighborhood street, and then they go back. So the lots are long and deep, as opposed to most suburban subdivisions have a wide lot. The house is long to the street. We really turn it the other direction. The other kind of housing that we're looking at, next frame here, is the cottage cluster. And basically the idea there is to create, I'll call it almost a campground. It's basically sort of a settlement of cottages with shared open space, and there's a parking area that you come and you park, and then you pick up your bag of groceries and you go and walk to your unit and have a nice little porch to get in the door out of the rain. And these have become really quite a nice sort of object of affection for new housing as sort of a comfort level. They're cozy. We like them. They're sweet. So we also just wanted you to know, most importantly, that we have been thinking about your region in all of this and just getting a feeling for, the characterization. We're obviously not going to recreate 200-year-old buildings here, but just the scale and comfort. And in some cases, there are certainly places where there are aggregations of houses into little hamlets and village centers all through the region. So that's part of what we're looking at here for a new neighborhood in this area. And here's somebody that had a little more time to draw than I did this afternoon, really looking at that sort of classic. What we wanted to make sure we weren't doing was rural sprawl. So we didn't want to basically take all the property and subdivide it into large lots and then lose all of the environmental, agricultural, all the other potentials. So what we're clustering is really take the density and make a place out of it, make a community center or a neighborhood, and have public spaces. It doesn't have to be as formal as this may look here. This is the idea of mixing housing types, mixing in open space, and having a diversity, and have it really being a portion of a town or community. Okay, just want to give you some eye candy here. The prototype of what we had hoped, we hope to do is sort of, whether it's a single family house, or in the case of this one right here, there are 5 units of housing in that one building there, and there's a whole neighborhood of them that the next slide will show you. So this is them arrayed in a neighborhood-like pattern. We think that there is an appropriate architecture that might work well for you here. It's not an idea that's like stolen from somewhere else. It's not like a affordable housing unit from California or anything like that. It is of a typology of housing and architecture of New England. So these are just characterizations. So we're using the big house, back house, barn like configuration, and those fit within these areas here, and you can see them in the sketches there. So just walking through that. And this is, as you can see, this typology in a neighborhood context is almost 200 years old in our region, just for example. And what happens is those might have been originally an individual family of 5, 6, 7 kids and parents. Back up one. Or they also work to be multiple units. So you can see how they sort of array themselves. But this is the longer, narrower lot with buildings set to the front and to the back. This is all new. So again, to just reassure you that we can do new housing that looks like it fits. This is in a village center in another part of New Hampshire, but it is affordable housing. So this is just looking at comparative density, because what we've tried to do in setting up the neighborhood pattern is have it be very flexible for 1 family, 2 family, 4 family arrangements in a variety of configurations with basically, we're kind of like putting the tablecloth out, and then you can set your place setting for each parcel. Could be treated differently depending on really the housing program that's to be built, the development entity that's going to be carrying it out. So these explorations of different patterns in the arrangement and spacing of buildings street here. This is the spacing that's in your village zoning right now. And then these are spacings that go to narrower and narrower lots right up to, I think, around here. I think in here we're at roughly a 60 or a 60-foot lot width. Your village lot width, I think, is 80 feet. So, and also weighting those with different characters of village centers. So again, this is looking at sort of just the geometry of the templates of housing, and it works, how it works. I'm going to keep going. Examples of cottage cluster. Again, we're looking, and people walk from the parking to their individual cottage units. We want the housing to be joyful. And the other part on the single family houses is you could start with a starter house. Everybody's talking about, you know, how can young families have a starter house so they can get going to have an affordable unit. No. Oh, no. This is a sign that I'm talking too much. We're going to get the cane in a minute here. But this shows the progression of a starter house through an accessory dwelling unit, a home office, and other things that people might want over the course of their lives to, in the life of their family, to have options and still be able to basically live and age in place. So this is a multi-generational opportunity, and the big thing with like accessory dwelling units is sometimes the parents, after the kids have left and moved on, is they actually can move into the accessory dwelling unit and then rent it to a new family who might need a larger house, because there comes a point when maybe you don't want to take care of a 3 or 4 bedroom house and you'd like to have, I call it the vacuum it in 7 minutes or less. So these are basically the program of the different kinds of units that we've looked at. We have single family. We've set those up as units for purchase. The majority of the housing that we're looking at, having gone through an economic analysis of everything, is the majority of the value of the housing for this particular location is housing for purchase. We have worked really hard through the day to consider the place and opportunities for rental. It's less here because we have no municipal sewer and water for that. So that is a really limiting factor of this location. And now,
all right. No? Yes? All right, I'll try. Everybody. So I wanted to start and talk about the county complex land. As part of this, that would likely be divided off. And through the listening sessions, we talked about a lot of different uses that the community was in need of. And again, as part of that subdivision, it may be worth considering what some of this might be, and subdividing, serving some of that land for those uses. Things like community services for folks who are housing insecure, daycare, workforce housing for county employees. They're all type uses, and the county has the opportunity to use them how they see best fit, even if it doesn't quite fit in the zoning. Preserving those lands gives you the opportunity to use those lands as the community needs in the future. A big concern, too, is the agricultural land. There's a lot of prime agricultural soils on this property. Any transaction or a subdivision, it could be worth considering putting an easement over that prime agricultural land in favor of the county, so you have control of that going forward. You decide what happens with it in perpetuity. It could still be used for density purposes on the larger lot, so they could still get the unit counts, but the county still maintains that control, so you can do with it what you see fit. All right, next slide here. So through this, we found a few limitations of the cluster housing ordinance. One of them was the 10,000 square foot minimum lot size and 50% lot coverage. This, the design as it is has frontage about 60 feet, and the ordinance requires 80 feet. With the reduced frontage, we're able to reduce the road count, the utilities, and the overall cost of the development. If an ordinance could be amended to reduce that frontage, and we'll talk about some options in a minute, it still provides that density count that you're looking for, that the zoning ordinance was trying to achieve, but also allows for the smaller lot size and lower development cost overall. Also, the potential for multifamily. The cluster housing ordinance is fairly limiting on that. There's a acre minimum for multifamily, and nothing over 4 units is permissible in this zone. So looking at that as well, could there be regulations that fit the desire of the zoning ordinance in the town, but also allow for a higher density? Those multi-unit buildings are also less expensive to construct. And there's ways to do it, so it still fits in with the overall scale and feel of the community. All right, next slide, Brandon. So some considerations for what could change in the zoning ordinance to make a development like this or something similar happen. One of them is planned unit developments, which could be an aspect of the cluster housing ordinance. And so this sets aside the typical lot dimension, frontage, the setbacks, things like that. You no longer require 10,000 square feet per lot. You still have the same density count, so overall, but those units are together. On a lot like this, where we're trying to preserve agricultural soils, there's wetlands, there's unique features that an ordinance can't always anticipate. So allowing a contractor to build the roads, build the developments, place the house where it fits best on the property, but still works with the density count that the community is looking for, can be a very good way to do it. I think there's a 5 acre minimum road length in that would be 640 feet to get the maximum density. If it was a planned unit development, that could be dropped down to 400 feet, so reducing that cost quite a bit. All right, next slide. And transfer development is another option. This property has a lot of land that isn't necessarily going to be built on. An extensive road would have to be put in to build in the middle of that lot. So how could that land be preserved, and how could it still be used in the community? Is an option. So you take the developmental density from one lot here that's going to be preserved, let's say in conservation, and you place that density on another lot that might be better suited for development. So overall, in a zone in the community, you're getting the density the zoning ordinance set out to create, but you're relocating that buildable area to other locations where it might be cheaper to put in a road, could be closer to public infrastructure or community resources. So it can be a good tool. It could be part of something like the cluster housing ordinance. And then the community could also decide what they want that housing to look like. If someone is transferring density from one location to another, specify that it's the housing that the community needs to make sure that you continue to develop for.
All right, I got this back in my hands. I've got both. I could double barrel this and see what happens. So while we were going through the design process and working through the layouts and so on, the design team, the engineers, myself and Brian here, we started looking at what the construction costs would be for the site work. So we were looking at roadway infrastructure costs, community water system costs, septic, those types of things from our end. And our cohorts, who are the developers, Alex and some others, were going through and identifying building development costs. So we started looking at different types of building construction, square foot, cost per square foot of building construction, different types of construction to land on what our overall costs were for the project. So we have a very detailed spreadsheet and a lot of information that took about 6 hours of modification and reiteration and back and forth. But ultimately what we landed on is a development here that includes, and it's shown up on the scale. And I know that Bob and Mike were talking about the development is on each 10,000 square foot area could be single family, duplex, or even quads. What we landed on was a mix of 52 single-family homes, 45 single-family cottages, 20 duplexes for purchase, and then another 20 duplex cottages that are a little bit smaller. With all of that, we looked at the construction costs for the building, we looked at the construction costs of the road, we looked at soft costs associated with design, permitting, and all of those things, as well as a return for a developer. And our overall cost for a project of this magnitude with the unit layout that's up there was between $57 million and $62 million for this overall development. And that unit count is 167 total units. And we talked about 388 at the beginning. We landed at 167 total units. Let's see. What's that? We'll get to that. That's the next step. Look, when we initially started this project, and we were really schematic. We were developing, I think we were at 180 units or something, and our overall cost was about $123 million. And we hadn't even started figuring out unit costs at that point in time, but what we ended up doing is scaling ourselves back because we didn't have enough buildable space for that many units. So that's really the area that we were willing to and able to build in affordably from a construction standpoint, brought us back down to the 167 units that we had. And there will be some commentary on the mix. As you can see, all of these are for purchase units. And we did hear you that you were looking for a mix of for rent and for purchase, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. So with these costs in place, I'm going to hand this over. Well, we started looking at cost per unit. I think the next slide, does it go into that, Brandon? It's hard to read up there, but we started looking at what these costs per unit could be. And these are different types of units. They're different sizes of units. And we started off by saying, all right, well, how do we make this work? We wanted to have a mix of affordability. We do, as a team, we recognize that there has to be some market rate units to make it a project affordable. And then so that we can hit the workforce housing rates for some of the others. So what we ended up with is for a mix is that we were looking at our single family homes that we have outlined out there. I think there were 52 of them. I don't remember what the final number was, 52. Those single family homes would be sold at market rate. We identified market rate at somewhere around 380 something thousand, and Josh Bruston, our resident realtor here, having done some research on home sales for market rate homes, found that could be a reasonable number for us to work with for a market rate home sale for our single family units. When we started working through the numbers and the costs and so on, we started to find that our other units, the single family cottages, the duplex cottages, and the duplex units, all potentially fell within what could be considered a workforce rate. So I'm going to hand this over to Brittany to talk about how the workforce rates are developed and what the cost of our homes that we had positioned at that point.
Thank you, Josh. So for those of you who are kind of curious on what workforce housing rate is, it is predetermined by New Hampshire Housing what the max amount would be to qualify to be a workforce priced for purchase home. So in the state of New Hampshire, it is $322,000 or lower. Now I know if you were here the past couple nights, we did talk about affordable in a couple different ways. We talked about it in the little a and we talked about it in the big A. So this falls under the big A, so it's affordable for our area. It may not necessarily be affordable for you specifically, unfortunately. So when we kind of took a little bit of a deeper look into that, the single family cottage, we were able to estimate that the purchase price would be $322,000. The loan program that we looked at for this is for a first-time home buyer using New Hampshire Housing's FHA program with $15,000 in down payment assistance. The interest rate today was 6.625% on that. and it gets us an estimated fully escrowed monthly payment of $2,748. So that's including your insurance, your private mortgage insurance, your property tax, and an estimated HOA fee. Again, this is the big A affordable, not the little a necessarily. But with that, that single family cottage in a multi-income household, so if you've got two people, it would be an annual salary of $94,212 combined, which does fit in underneath our AMI for Carroll County. The next one was the duplex cottage. That one was able to come in a little bit less expensive at $317. Again, using the FHA program through New Hampshire Housing for first-time home buyers with $15,000 in down payment assistance. Estimated fully escrowed payment of $2,776. This does, on a multi-income household, and grosses out to $86,000 a year. And if these were your annual salaries, I know the number seems really scary, but if that was the total of you and another person in your household, it does equal out to about 30 to 35% of your monthly income, which is the definition of affordable.
I'm going to pass this over to Harrison Kanzler to talk about why, what we looked at from a rental side of this and why it didn't necessarily work for us.
Thank you. So just as a refresher, we're talking about that lot there. So I'm going to use this. So we, first of all, we also understand this lot potentially has a cliff somewhere in here, so this wouldn't actually work. Again, this is hypothetical. We were just going off pictures, so that's what we do. And I want to stress that a big part of the process we go through is truth testing. So what we're doing is we had these listening sessions, we heard you and what you want, and now we're seeing, is that true for your community? And unfortunately, some of the things we heard were you want a mix of different housing types. You want a mix of income affordability levels in there. Some folks were saying high density multifamily type stuff. As we already talked about, we can't do that based on zoning. So you would have to change your zoning if you wanted something like that to happen on this lot. There are places in OSPI you can do that. This is not one of them. Even if we wanted to bend the zoning, unfortunately, it still wouldn't work. And a big part of that has to do with construction costs. What we ended up looking at, we went away from the big multifamily, and we just did fourplexes. So these would be large, basically just like large farmhouse style homes that would have four units in them. There are 10 of them, so it's a total of 40 apartments. And the idea would be the developer would own these and then would rent them out. First, I tried running the numbers. This, by the way, is $10 million, roughly, is how much this would cost. You need $3 million. If it's a for-profit developer, they're going to need $3 million to get this started in cash. So what I said is, okay, well, let's look at how much is the financing going to cost? What is the rate of return they're going to want on that? And then how can you really build this out? So the first thing I did was say, can we do 100% workforce housing? What does it look like at 60% AMI, rental for 40 units? What's the return on that going to be? The return on their investment was going to be well over 20 years. No for-profit developer is going to touch that. They want closer to 7 or 8 years. So way off. So we upped it to 80% area median income, again, at 100 of them. At 100% of them. So all 40 units at 80% area median income. For starters, we were talking about affordability, and I know a lot of people have concerns about that. Important to know that I was calculating these at 2-bedroom units, so 40 2-bedroom units. That at an 80% rate is $1,800 a month. Gross rent, so it's including utilities and everything, which I still felt is a little high for the area. But even then, it comes in at a return at a little over 16 years, which is still about double what a developer would be looking for on the return for rental housing. So if you're looking for someone to do it for profit, it is likely not going to happen. Someone else said they wanted to not use taxpayer money. I took that to mean subsidy. I don't think this would happen without subsidy, so you would need a nonprofit to come in and layer in different programs in order to make it work, if that's what you wanted. Some of the concerns that you all voiced are ours as well. There is insufficient water infrastructure to make this work. If you wanted to do it, the 40 units as like a single apartment building, which would make it much more affordable, not only to manage, but to build. You have to put a fire suppression system in it. No one is going to do that on a well. It's just too risky. You want a pressurized municipal water system to be handling that. So this part of town, in general, you're not going to get this type of development, unfortunately. So start looking at your community and say, well, where do we want this type of development? Does it have adequate infrastructure? And does the zoning match? Because for this parcel, it's kind of out of the equation, unfortunately. So while we heard that was really what you all wanted, we put quite a lot of time into designing it, and at the end of the day, the numbers unfortunately just don't work out.
So that's kind of how the iteration of us going from really excited about 388 potential units on the property to 167 of what you see in that single developable area that we spent a lot of time talking about. So I wanted to touch, yes? Yeah. Because of the lack of infrastructure, large scale rental just doesn't work, and we couldn't do large multifamily homes because of the need for, or multifamily apartment buildings because of the need for water infrastructure. So we went to quads to try to, you don't need a sprinkler system, and we try to get around that aspect of it. But it just the math, just the construction costs and the math of everything, we couldn't get the return on investment for a private developer. That has nothing to do with the upper lot. The upper lot, as designed right now, is for sale, units for sale, as we've laid it out. So our proposal right now is 167 for sale units in a mix of single family homes, single family cottages, duplex cottages, and duplexes. So I wanted to touch quickly on the impacts to the town of Ossipee. Briefly, not all of the impacts. Obviously, we spent a lot of time trying to draw and do math. So the time was limited at the end as everybody was walking in and we were scrambling to come up with things to talk about. The proposal that we show at the top here on the easel doesn't impact the water and sewer infrastructure that exists. The proposal is to provide on-site septic and on-site community water systems that would not impact the water systems that are available. It keeps the prime farmland available on the county land for use and for farming. Ryan touched on how we can preserve that type of land in perpetuity and make sure that continues to happen even with development happening around it. Throughout all of this, we've made the assumption that if you move forward with this type of project, that we would have deed restrictions of no second homes. They'd all be primary homes for sale. There would be no second homes. So we would look through deed restrictions, homeowner association type things to make that happen. Initially, the road system would be a private homeowners association, but there could be the conversation of whether or not that private homeowners association road infrastructure becomes town road infrastructure. Because a project like this, based on the current tax base, is going to be adding about $650,000 of taxes to the town of Ossipee on land that's currently generating $0 of taxes to the town. And then further to that, there was a lot of discussion about the impacts of these developments on municipal infrastructure, fire safety, and those types of things. It will also bring people who live in Ossipee, people who aren't currently in Ossipee. So we will have people that can be volunteer fire department members. We have people who can be EMTs, nurses, and so on that can live in your community and provide that people benefit overall. And then finally, I wanted to just touch on some of the future opportunities that we have here. There's over 800 acres of land. We're using about 60, over not even quite 60 acres of the land with our development and not maximizing density on the lot. So there are, another 400 acres of land outside of the parcel that we're looking at, plus or minus, that has the potential to provide density rights or development for future housing. We also didn't use all of the density on this lot, and as Ryan mentioned, if there is a better lot or a more developable lot, maybe we can transfer some of the density rights if we start looking at that, the lot development transfer that he was talking about, transfer development rights, transfer some of those density rights to more developable areas that are correct and right for the community. So to get the units that you need and get the units that we need globally in our region of the state. And I think that is it for our reveal. So I guess at this point in time, we open it up to questions. What? I did. I hit that. Yeah, we only have one microphone, I think, that works. Maybe two. I don't know if this one works too. Let's try to see if we can get this one to work.
All right, I have a question, and I don't think anyone brought it up at the listening sessions, I know that we need 3-bedroom units in Carroll County. Is that in this design at all, or was it thought about?
I think the single-family homes were 3-bedroom, and so the cottages might have been a little bit smaller, but the single-family homes that were for sale were 3-bedroom.
Thank you.
So does that price, when you were showing the $429,000, does that include the land also as a price?
Overall, we have made the assumption that the land will be gifted.
It would be gifted. So it would be a land trust kind of thing? Or?
However, we didn't get into the details of the structure of that. We just assumed that there would be no land
So
acquisition
you're just
costs.
talking purely about building costs,
Correct.
not the land. All right.
Would there be a prohibition against someone buying one of these homes and then renting it out via Airbnb?
Yeah, 100%. It would have to be a primary home. That would be the restriction, the deed restriction that we'd have.
Right now, all this property is owned by the people of Carroll County, managed by the commissioners. You were talking about, in order to preserve the agricultural land, that there would probably have to be an easement. Right now, the commissioners are in charge of that agricultural land. What is the ownership of all this land going to be by developers, that the county would have to get an easement for the agricultural land? I'm not clear on ownership of the land.
The structure that we took as part of this was to subdivide out all the land that was not immediately surrounding the active county buildings and facilities. So that would put the farmland on a private parcel. And so we then made the assumption that there would be an easement granted in perpetuity to the county to be able to manage that farmland. Is that fair? Yeah, and even some other conservation lands or whatever. The actual owner of the subdivided parcel, again, we didn't get into the fine details of that. We just said this land is going to have a zero cost to acquire, and this is the development that we anticipate trying to put on it. That was the assumption that we made.
I think kind of a follow-up to that. So did the easement come into play because that's what you needed to do cluster?
The easement, so the land, initially when we started this process, the land that the prime agricultural land is on, we anticipated needing to be used for the density that we needed. So we needed the actual land to be on the parcel that we were going to build the units on. So therefore, we assumed that the agricultural use would need to be on the land and then granted access to it, to the county through the easement. So we needed the overall land mass in our initial conversations to get to the density that we felt we needed.
Could you just explain cluster development so that people understand what you're even talking about having to have so much land to have that?
Yeah, so with cluster development, what you do is you look at an overall lot and you do the calculation of, say the community of Ospey says you need 10,000 square feet per unit. We determine the size of a lot and then, for lack of a better way, divide it by 10,000 square feet, and that's how many units we could get on there. In theory, we actually went to the state septic regulations for this one to make sure that we were hitting a state mark and not over developing this beyond what state septic standards would require us to do or make us do. So we went to state septic. So that's where the 388 units on the 422 acres came into play. If we were trying to get to the 388 units, we would need all 422 acres of land outside of that blue rectangle, which would be the county parcel, to get to the number of units that we were hoping to get. In that, we would need the farmland on the parcel, but we wouldn't develop on the farmland. It would look exactly as it is now, and then we'd provide an easement back to the county for them to manage that land. We get microphone.
Does the ownership of that prime agricultural land still change hands, though? Does it
Yes.
remain? It does.
Yes,
Oh.
and then it would be granted an easement.
So future development is possible in that.
Not with an easement in perpetuity for agricultural use for the county.
Just a question in terms of geography. You just covered up the lower lot that we were talking about earlier in terms of the duplexes and all. That blue water area, water body, is that Babson Pond?
Maybe somebody who's more familiar. It doesn't. Our map doesn't have a label on it, so somebody more familiar with the land could. Yes, it is. Evelyn, we have one in the front.
We've kind of switched channels a little bit. So this current parcel, are any of those for rental or are they all for purchase?
The upper layout with the green on top is all for purchase. Our proposal does not include any rental units because we just couldn't get the math to work for a return for a private developer. We had some clarification here.
So one thing that could happen with the single family or potentially even the two family in that same area is that any number of single family homes could have an accessory dwelling unit. So for as many lots and single family houses we have there could be accessory dwelling units that could be owned and rented by the property owner of that particular home. So obviously that's each one is a very personal decision by that family whether to have an accessory dwelling unit, either for the purposes of their own extended family. They call them a granny flat. They call them, boomerang houses for the kids that come back from college and don't want to live in the same house as the parents, but might want to, just get a start. So anyway, there is a rental component through the accessory dwelling, but it's not part of the development pro forma necessarily with a builder of the project.
And just to touch on that a little bit further, there are 72 buildable areas through here that we have single family homes or duplexes on, and those would be eligible for the ADU. So in theory, there could be another 72 rental units on each of those single family homes that could be managed by the homeowner.
All right, so I wanted to kind of go to the big A and little a, because the numbers that you guys gave us are still pretty large for a lot of the people that live here. So you're saying that would be the price if this was privately developed. How could that price go down to make it easier for us?
Not have somebody with a great heart that comes in and is not looking for a return. We estimated these numbers in some cases between a 15% return for a developer and a 25% return for a developer. A developer, especially for a project of this magnitude, we even had a hard time accounting for carrying costs of what it's going to take to just extend this development over the course of 10, 12, 15 years to finish the number of homes that we're talking about. A lot of our numbers were in today's dollars. So it was looking for a smaller rate of return on a developer. So then you start getting yourselves into nonprofit activity, some sort of subsidized construction costs, which private developers are not eligible for. So you'd have to find an organization potentially that could handle a project like this and be able to go after New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority tax credits or other programs to offset construction costs. Do they exist, Harrison? Those organizations? For single family, they don't.
Not for purchase, correct.
So the state of New Hampshire doesn't have any programming for purchase housing. So there are some programs that the Federal Home Loan Bank offers a program where developers can get up to $80,000 per unit, I think, as a subsidy to help bring costs down and then sell it. It's only available to nonprofits. And then there are some other larger groups nationally that offer grants that you can use to do it, but there's nothing through the state that incentivizes that type of development for nonprofits.
And touching on the overall cost, and we talked about big A versus little A, these are workforce houses, so they are affordable to an individual, not necessarily to a group of individuals. It's some people may be able to land there. One of the things that we talked about during the course of the day was just providing inventory. So, adding 167 units of workforce housing that there are people in our region that can afford opens up capacity in rentals and other housing types in and around the community that creates opportunity for people to infill behind where they came from. So that's something to consider too, because there are many people that are living or that are currently renting and wish that they were living in a house that they could purchase and are unable to find those homes for purchase that I believe would fill these homes, and then we'd have the ability to backfill or infill behind them.
Hi there. Can you tell us again what the burden, the tax burden is going to be to the Ossipee taxpayers?
In this scenario, the tax burden is actually a positive $650,000 annually. We're looking at a private development, so this would be maybe it's a granting of a land to an individual or a developer that goes through and develops this and then creates taxable homes and taxable land.
So now I'm going to ask a selfish question. And this may be outside the scope of what you guys could look at, but in addition to restricting something like this to primary residents, is it possible that purchases would be restricted to residents of the county who already live here, as opposed to people who are being brought in by employers, seeing as there are so many people who are already probably trying to find this kind of home?
For starters, it would be entirely up to the developer. You can, if it's a private development, they can put some restrictions on without violating fair housing. Typically in a system like this, if it were a planned unit development, what you would do is have an application process and to make it an objective process. But then you could offer preference based on specific categories. So for instance, if you say you are a Carroll County resident or you are employed in Carroll County, you get bonus points on your application, and that's going to make you score higher than someone else who does not meet that criteria. And so that way it is still available and open to everyone, but you can provide preferential treatment to people who meet that certain criteria. So a developer could do that if it, again, that typically tends to be a mission-based organization that would do something like that. A for-profit developer is typically going to say, I need to sell these homes and get my money back. So they will sell it. I mean, the primary residency is going to typically naturally make it so that it's mostly people who are working in the area who are going to want to buy those homes.
So I do work for a private developer who's built mixed market income and affordable income projects. And so I have seen it work where there are restrictions on the affordable side of things where you can do a local preference program and do that for those units. So I think there are developers out there who, if the numbers work right, will build the market rate, and the only restriction on the market rate being that it is a long-term resident, not a second homeowner. But then on the affordable side, be able to put those local preferences in place. I've seen that happen and it works.
So, I have a couple questions. So that cost, that monthly cost, was built on a 6 point whatever it was interest rate. So interest rates go up. Back in 1980, they were 12%. For people who've been around that long, and then for a long time they were like 2%. 1% almost. So if the rate goes down, that's a pretty big savings for people. So I guess you can't anticipate that, although they do seem to be going down right now. So let's just put that. It's a I've seen it go from 12% to 2% in my lifetime, which has been pretty long, actually. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, can you talk a little bit more about the savings because the land is free? So, and because you have gone from like a 1 unit on 2 acres to several units, it seems to me like people could be saving, I don't know what an acre of land costs right now around here, but it seems like people could be saving like $80,000 maybe on the land. Would that be right? If they had to buy something on 2 acres, and now I kind of just ran a quick little thing. It sounds like it was about $9,000 per unit, that you're kind of giving it. But anyhow, there's a big savings here, right? Has anybody figured that out, how big a savings that land thing is, if it's free?
I'll take it because I stole the mic from Josh to talk about something else. Yes, we figured it in that we didn't put in the cost for the land, so these units would be more expensive if someone were paying $50,000 per lot or whatever it is for the land. You'd be adding that into the cost. In terms of the affordability, I've also seen it where if this development were to move forward and it goes through the permitting process, that there can be a condition put on the permits that these affordable units are done. So it's not just at the developer's whim as to whether or not these units are done as affordable. That could be a condition of the permitting. So the slide that we put up there before with the prices on there, just to put something on it, we said, well, what if 25% of these went to workforce housing and 75% were market rate? And does that generate the return, which we think in our modeling it does? That could be a condition of the permit, that 25% of those are sold at those workforce rates.
Am I correct in that everyone who has been involved in this up there and in this charrette would be ineligible for any personal gain if this project were to go forward, either as an individual or via the company that they work for? Is that a true statement?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, I've got just a quick question. You said that this land is free, right? We're given it as a taxpayer of Carroll County. Don't we all taxpayers own that land? And shouldn't that come to a vote?
There was just an assumption for this theoretical exercise. This isn't a real project. So there's nothing to vote on. So we made an assumption, and one of the benefits of granting this is that it generates $650,000 of tax revenue.
And just one other question. I notice there's a lot of elected officials here. Would you guys all be willing to go on the record and say if you support this project or not?
Okay, it's not real, but I will go on the record and say I will not support this project. This is not workforce housing. This does not help the community. When you're talking about the funds that you're asking people to pay $2,776 a month to buy into a developer's development on our county land, we cannot call this workforce housing. The cost just for what you're saying to get in there for the income level is double our median income here. Double. That's not workforce housing. We're also looking at the fact that if I add up your beds, we're talking about 463 people if you're filling those beds and adding extra people in. If you're just filling the bedrooms, you're talking 326 people. And a lot of those are going to be children. So really you're talking about 131 adults who have a median income somewhere around $50,000. And you're saying this is workforce housing, the big A, little a, this is just, so yeah, I'm on record saying I am not supporting this. This is not workforce housing, and I don't think this is what our county should be giving up our land to a developer for.
I do just want to make one distinction. There are actually two numbers used for workforce housing. One is for rental housing, and that is $53,000 for Carroll County. For purchase housing is actually $94,000. It's 100% of the area median income when you consider for purchase versus for rent. So $94,000 a year does support purchasing the workforce housing units within this development. At the end of the day, building homes is expensive, and that's the reason we're in this pickle. So everybody here has to really think hard about how dedicated you really are to bringing more housing to the area, and I have to tell you, it's going to cost money. We have to figure out a way to do it. So I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we understood the difference between renter median income and for purchase median income in these definitions.
Hi, my question, well, a couple of comments. Number one, I'm disappointed that there really isn't a rental option included in this, because the majority of people I know that are homeless or needing housing desperately are needing apartments. They'll never be able to come up with a $10,000 down payment no matter what. They can't even pay their rent now, and some of them are homeless, so it's not going to help very much for those people, and that's an urgent situation. One question I have for your calculations on your insurance. I'm a retired insurance agent. I know homeowners insurance inside and out. You're never going to get a homeowner's policy for $125 a month, and that was your calculation in the figures there. The average on say a $350,000 property in Ossipee are probably more like a minimum of $1,000 a year, and that's assuming you have a good credit rating. All of your insurance policies now are rated on credit, so if you have poor credit, you either don't get any at all or you pay a higher rate. So those calculations are subject to the individual but never $125 a month. That wouldn't even pay for a tenant homeowner policy, which
you said that the insurance policy would be $1,000 a year.
A minimum of $1,000. Yeah.
That's less than $125 a month.
Oh, you're saying a month? Okay,
yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
And we were disappointed as well that we couldn't come up with a rental solution at the end of the day. If you don't have town water and sewer, you're going to have a tough time getting the density that is necessary to build the housing that will serve that $53,000 and under median income. Town water and sewer is huge
And I want to touch on that too. This is my 10th year of Charrette's, and we have not yet been able to find a multifamily project that worked without municipal water, at least municipal water.
Did you figure out the total cost for water and sewer for this development separately? Or is there a way to factor that out?
We did. We didn't share the spreadsheet, but Brian and I have done enough of this that we incorporated permitting and design costs for municipal or for a community water system, permanent design costs for community septic systems. We incorporated costs for the infrastructure for distribution for water, the infrastructure for distribution for sewer or septic, as well as the septic leach fields. So all of that was incorporated in our infrastructure design costs that Brian and I plugged and chugged on earlier today.
Are you willing to share that number? Or are you able to share that number?
I don't even remember it was probably 6 hours ago.
And I just want to clarify, I think that what we're talking about is for the single family and cottage lots up there being on well and septic.
Correct.
We did not do any pricing out as to how much it would cost to get a community, like a wastewater and water system that would serve multifamily, because the cost it was absolutely not going to work. I have no talk like $40 million, a lot.
I guess where I'm going with that is if
if there was a partnership with a nonprofit or a municipality to go after funding for a rural development community block grant, whatever it takes to build a water and sewer system, what does that take away?
That would take a significant amount of cost off of what we anticipated. Again, we'd have to open up the computer and figure out what our assumptions were. But it was, I think we were running $80 a linear foot on water system or sewer, and $60 for water, plus the cost of design and construction of the wells and all of that. So it would definitely reduce the overall infrastructure cost by a pretty wide margin for development like this. But the bottom line is, I don't care where the water and sewer comes from. If you don't have to build it as part of your project, it makes it much more affordable.
So maybe a follow-up later to understand what that number looks like?
We can dive into that.
Thank you.
It was very rough.
Oh, the same one? Okay.
Well, no, I was going to say, if they're going to build water and sewer, why couldn't we build big enough water and sewer for them?
I like you already. I don't even know you. Yes.
Sure. Yes. You don't have the microphone.
Does it make any sense in the current economy with current interest rates? Does it make any sense in the current economy with current interest rates to be even talking about this? The reality is, like they said, the average person around here makes about $50,000 a year. They can't afford a $2,700 a year month mortgage. They can't afford it.
I don't think that's a blanket statement for everyone in the area and the people that could live in the area. Well, again, I spoke to it earlier about infill. So you have people who are living in apartments now all around the Carroll County that have the means to be able to afford something like this, but don't have anywhere to try to purchase, that they can transfer out into these for purchase areas and then create rental opportunities. They would fill into the rental that the people who are buying homes are leaving.
The idea is good, but this is not the financial time.
Just to your point, I think Josh just highlighting that there are some people that can't afford that. But this exercise, the 8 hours today, which started in one place and came to another, that wasn't the outcome we were hoping for. But it just spells out. What this also does is it highlights the reality that we're in. And that's part of this process, is to show you what the limitations are.
We're going to go ahead and move it to our next question.
Perhaps not a question. First of all, I want to thank all the people that came to work on the Charrette. This is tens of thousands of dollars that these folks did not get paid for in their average day. They're here for the benefit of our county. David Page, Richard Brown, myself, Chuck McGee, and I believe Bill Nelson, commissioner over there, and Melissa sitting behind the desk have spent hours and hours in a year trying to look at what's the best use of our property. Folks, don't shoot the messenger. Thank the messenger. We are going to continue on. This may not be the project. Parts of this project may end up working. So give them a bear hug when you leave, because this is monumental what's been done. And we, as a subcommittee, David, Richard, and I, and the commissioners, and Melissa, I cannot overemphasize the work that she does for us. Don't shake your head at me. That we are going to continue, because the hallmark is preserving our agricultural land. We need housing for people that work in our county complex and for others. And maybe this isn't the model. I've seen models that do work, But as they have mentioned, it takes that very kind person, it takes a hospital, it takes somebody to come in that will be willing to put money into this. So I personally want to thank each and every one of you, and I want you to know that we are going to continue on. The idea of allowing the spreadsheet to come forward, fantastic. It will allow us for future planning. So I don't want to take away time from anyone else, but this is not in the can. This is nothing we are building. This is a beautiful exercise that we had. And when someone asked me to say whether I do it or not, and then maybe I'm a neighbor that doesn't want to see something happen, that's not what we're here, folks. We're here for the people that work for our county and finding something affordable. So thank you.
So I'm also on the committee, and I've spent a lot of time with this, and a lot of people giving us direct input outside of these meetings. But what I want to make sure people understand is that we've been in 2 sessions the last 2 days. Quite a few people have come to be active in this. When you look up there behind these folks that have worked hard all day, that's what we asked them to do based on the feedback we gave them. Okay, and as a result of that, they came up with these plans. Okay, you can't fault these folks for coming up with a $380,000 house and no septic or sewer system. They did the best they could with that. And having been a civil engineer, I know how this stuff works. The fact is that they gave us the best that they could with the information we gave them. I know the committee that has been working on this and some of the other delegations members, including Jonathan, who spent some time here today as well, working with the folks about the zoning code and what's possible. This isn't what we envisioned based on what we've seen, but this is what these people saw based on the input we gave them. We had, I think, in my opinion, a more modest plan for people with a lower income to be able to do this, okay? That's not what we see tonight, but that's something that we're working towards. And I encourage everybody that is here tonight to come to some of the County Land Committee meetings and give us your feedback, because we've had very few people do those, come to those, and give us those feedbacks. So I'd appreciate if you do that. I think the comments that people have made are very valid for where we are tonight. But we certainly aren't there, and I'm not prepared to support the project as they presented, but it does tell you how difficult this is to do. So thank you.
At the end of the day, you're spot on. This is hard. It's expensive. That's the reason we're behind. There's literally no other way to say it. We can continue to do nothing. We can continue to be the fastest growing county in the state without housing for that growth, or we can begin to figure out how to do something about it, and that can be one house at a time, that can be 160 houses at a time, or it can be a multifamily building on town water and sewer, which is another endeavor, to your point, Melissa, for the town of Ossipee, right? I just think everybody has to realize doing nothing doesn't solve the problem. So we have to start thinking about what we can do, even if it's in small chunks, in order to win this battle.
I want to thank everybody that's worked so hard, because I know how Charrette's, it's an amazing piece of work, and it gives a lot of potential and ideas and everything. With the deep dive that you did in the zoning laws for the town of Ossipee, I live in Tuftonboro, but what would the Ossipee residents want? They've done an amazing job with some of their changes to their zoning recently in the last couple of years. Did you find any roadblocks that perhaps the Ossipee residents may want to consider to help support affordable housing, workforce housing, density housing, and all of that? Thank you.
I think Ossipee has done a fantastic job with their zoning. I think it's a really well put together document. I think the big things to consider are that you don't necessarily have to change the density of the overall lot, there was more potential density on this property than we could use just because of the layout, the restrictions on septic and water and those needs. There are things that you could change, like a planned unit development or something like that, where it would reduce the cost of that. So you're reducing the road length that's needed, the utilities that would need to go in there. So there's some options that way that do bring down the cost. I think overall density is a decision of the community. Where do you want that to be? Where should higher density be located? And that's something that needs a lot of thought. Where is future water and sewer going to be considered? That's how it should be thought out. It shouldn't be lot by lot. But there are certain things, especially with the cluster housing ordinance, that could be shifted to at least reduce the cost of constructing those developments.
And just for reference, it costs about $2 million a mile of road to build. So that was the number, and that's without municipal infrastructure in it. That's just the construction of a road to a town standard. So that used to be, when I started my career 20 years ago, that was $1 million a mile was the number. And since about 2018, that number of $1 million a mile in your head has gone from $1 million a mile to $2 million a mile. Anything you can do to reduce the amount of construction necessary to get to the most number of units is going to create a higher opportunity for affordability. And so if you just look at it, the least amount of road you can build is the key, because that's a lot of your on-site construction costs are sitting right there in the road or what's in the road.
Hi, so just to be on the table, I don't support the numbers. I do support the idea because it's something that is definitely necessary. And there's definitely things that you could do to reduce those numbers. But mostly I wanted to ask about the agricultural side of it. If there's no building, I mean, how much acreage are we talking about there? And is that something that could be added to the design, but then potted out for the community or the homeowners to use as a local garden? That would also increase the amount of tax dollars that come in.
So we heard that the preservation of ag soils was a high priority, and we honored that. There are a couple areas in order to capture the footprint of property that we needed to do to capture the density also coincided with the overlaid area for easement for agricultural soils. I'm just going to say yes. It's the shortest answer I've ever given in a public meeting.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, what the idea is, the developer has to own the agricultural land to get that density. But what they would do is say, we own this, but it is the community's land. We just are owning it for this purpose. So that would be a legal easement on that agricultural land for the county, which means if the county wants to do that, they can at any point. And the developer can't do anything about it because they have the easement. They can do whatever they want on that land. So yes, we did both. We tried to preserve the land and use it to hit this density. So to Robert's point, yes, you could do that.
Was there any assumption about using the existing water and sewer system in any of these designs?
No, because it was our understanding it was completely capped out. So that was raised as a chief concern multiple times. So that was a part of why all that top development is on so just a quick clarification, that's on community water and septic, meaning that it is it only serves those properties. Municipal would be a larger thing. That's what you would need in order to do the multifamily, and that's what's lacking.
So this has been framed as a kind of Ossipee, Carroll County thing. How many houses are needed all over the whole county? What's the shortfall? Does anybody have that number?
2,500 by 2030, 3,217 by 2040 if we continue to not build.
Yeah, and I mean, I looked at the numbers for, Yeah, I looked at the numbers for Sandwich. Like they should build 80 houses in Sandwich, for example, to meet those goals. But one other thing, I really want to congratulate everyone. Yesterday's meeting was probably the first time that I saw people from all over the spectrum actually working together for a common goal. So this is something I think we should really pursue. Obviously, everyone across the spectrum wants to work on it. This could be like the healing moment that we really need. So just want to say that. Thank you.
Hi, it's Kate. I know some people are very disappointed and they see the numbers, but I think they came with expectations. And the truth of it is that we have a diverse population. Not everyone is making $40,000 a year. Some people here are making well over $100,000. So we have variety of people in a variety of socioeconomic levels. So I don't think it's fair to think that one project is going to be the answer for everyone. And it looks like we're going to need, many projects that are just geared for, very specific for that group. This is meant for obviously people making a certain income, and it would help in those people. But people here, very kind people, are very worried about those that are more vulnerable and they have nowhere to go. And I think they came hoping to find an answer to that, but it wasn't what you were offering today. So I think that's a different conversation, and that it's a conversation we should have, but it's not this conversation. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Katie Peternell. I'm a member of the Carroll County delegation. My question is about the projected population age. By 2030, the projected median age for Carroll County is going to be 65. And we're making a lot of assumptions about young people purchasing these homes. So I'm a little concerned about how we're going to guarantee that young families are the ones purchasing this project.
So what we've seen as patterns in housing in communities of aging, and so I spent about half of my life in Portsmouth and the other half in Intervale, and we're seeing it in Portsmouth. It's like 60 or 70% of the retirement age population who live in the city are financially stressed because they're paying far more than the 30% of their fixed income for housing, and then it just blew up the other day because we just got a reappraisal. So, but what's happening is as the population is aging, and basically people, family life cycles are ending in the family house that might have had 2, 3, 4 kids in it, a 2,500 square foot house and on a larger lot. Is that as people age out, age to have a different housing need, there's nowhere to go. In the same sort of starter house, a house that would be at a smaller scale, whether it's a cottage or just a small house with a ground floor bedroom for aging in place, becomes the same point of competition for young families who want a starter house as well as people looking to age in place with a simpler, smaller home. And so, but what happens is that as those aging families capture they sell the family house, they capture all the equity in that because they probably own an entire, so let's just say, both houses on either side of me in Portsmouth have sold for $1 million. And I live in a 3-unit condominium, so I'm a 1/3 of that. But anyways, so they've captured all that equity, but there's nowhere to go spend it because and also in terms of them competing for the same kind of house that a young family would find as affordable. It's the same building. So we have this sort of war of the ages that's happening between young and old, trying to capture the same kind of house. And so that is the dilemma that we have. Ideally, we would be targeting the housing in this, in this project, in this study, to have fit that. And actually, I think if we did succeed on something is, you know, within the confines of workforce, and you may disagree, you know, like what is the value of workforce housing? According to the official definitions to the, you know, to the state and New Hampshire housing, as well as federal standards of, you know, like what is affordable, what's workforce, is we actually came in right on the mark of the demographic and the price point that everybody wants, except for people that are further down on the income spectrum. We haven't captured that, and that is, you know, that's something I think most of us will go home from this group. Will go home just saying, oh, I really wish we'd been able to accommodate that. Wish I'd been able to do a cottage cluster for vets. You know, you see other communities that sponsor something and make that a place and make that a priority. You could do that, but you're also probably going to have to go to the Ossipee taxpayers and just say, hey, this is a public interest of ours. These are our people. We need to find some money to do it, or we need to go after, you know, special funding. We did not go after special funding, grants and all sorts of things in the assumptions, because frankly, this thing had to pencil out. You got 2 months worth of work in a day here for no cost. So those are some of the things that we have struggled with. If you think, I mean, I don't want to settle the disagreement with the guy back there with the vest out at the flagpole if he's going to take us down. But I'm just joking, but we did. But I don't think it's time to stop, because 150 or 100 people that have participated for the past 3 days in these know a whole lot more about this and have a lot more better information, and all, you know, and personal beliefs and values have been brought to the forefront for you all to talk about and think about. Now, what you do tomorrow morning with this, or next week or next month, is, you know, goes back to your land use committee. But you know a whole lot more now than you did 4 days ago. So you're in a better place.
Josh, do you mind? I just wanted to point out, because when we were doing the listening sessions and we were talking about how much houses are selling for, wasn't it 450,000 was the average selling? Thank you. So these are below that, so they are like semi-affordable compared to that. And I think what it is we're disappointed in the reality of what we're in right now. I think we all look at what we make, what can we afford, how is this going to work, and that's disappointing. But I don't feel like you guys have gypped us. You took what we said, and everyone, from what I've been hearing over the past week, is they don't want to take tax dollars. They don't want to take government handouts. They want it to be private. So you guys did exactly that. You showed us, okay, it's private. This is what it costs. This is the reality of what we're living right now. And this is why we're struggling.
And the median sale price in Ossipee specifically, with comparably sized homes, based on the research today, was $387,000. So you can see where we came in. Obviously, it's not, you know, adding up for everyone, but that's where we came in still.
And if I could add, it's just as a thought for all of you to consider, when it comes to housing, another thing that we have to address is generally the market. And so if homes that are on the market now are selling for $387,000, and you get an influx of brand new homes that are coming in at less than that, it is going to hurt those folks, unfortunately, economically, who are trying to sell their homes at $387,000. They're going to have to come down on their costs, but it's going to help to settle your market, because these homes that are older homes shouldn't necessarily be selling at $387,000. That's an inflated market situation. So having this added in is going to help stabilize your housing market and help drive prices down a bit more overall. So it's, again, it might not sound like what you were hoping for, but it cures things to some level in different ways.
Yeah, and again, I wasn't at all being negative. I just think that we have different problems because there are different incomes, and that today in this charrette was designed to do what people asked you to do, and you came back with real numbers, and the real numbers are just not going to reach certain people. And those are the people, I think people are, you know, they want to help the homeless, they want to help the people that are working the jobs that just do not pay $94,000 a year. They're making $38,000. But how can we make sure that they can go to their jobs? And these are jobs, have we not learned anything through the pandemic? We need these people. These are the essential workers that we need. And we certainly should find a way that they can have the dignity of a home. But I think those are just very different types of brainstorming and focusing on certain groups to say that that's what we're aiming for. How do we help people that are making between 30 and 55? And then we might come up with different solutions and, you know, different people coming in and perhaps even different funding and grants, because they would be targeting certain income levels as well, just as if you had targeted homeless people or people who are home insecure. They're just any day could be homeless. That might come with different grants, fundings, private money. So I think all these things will have to be broken up and focused on certain groups. But I just wanted to share that when we talk about the Ossipee taxpayers, you know, there's a lot of people in that group called Ossipee taxpayers who are making the $50,000, and they really can't afford their taxes to go up. It's not that they don't have the heart, it's just they themselves are just barely making it month to month. So I think that if you're looking for funding in there, it should not be cut across the board, because oddly enough, you might be forcing people out of the very home they have because they can't afford their taxes. And your example of one thing affecting the other, you know, having a consequence that you didn't want, but it's real. When you start changing one thing, putting like a lower price, it's going to affect somebody else in a negative way because they can't sell their house at the higher price. So it's a very intricate to play with these economic situations. And I think that it's not going to be as fast as people want. And I know people want an answer today or soon, and it's just not going to happen. But one good thing, even if you have the best idea, and it sounds so humanitarian, but when you put it in real life, it may have negative consequences that people just didn't see. So like putting it to the taxpayers, well, then other people might lose their house because they can't pay those higher taxes. So.
One of the things that we've learned, and we're hearing that we're not touching the lower income individuals, and we've learned this through this charrette and other charrettes, is that, and Ryan touched on it earlier, there's probably more appropriate places in Ossipee to develop multifamily housing where there are municipal services. And when you get to those areas, you start opening yourself up to organizations like Avesta or AHEAD that can go after the funding to help build multifamily housing in areas where it's appropriate in Ossipee. And what we learned today is that this is probably not an appropriate location for high-density multifamily housing because of the lack of infrastructure. But that does not mean that there are not opportunities in other parts of Ossipee to hit that group. But this land probably doesn't hit that group.
Hi, one additional question regarding a follow-up on your projections of the retail values of these units. Let's say the three-family units at, what was it, 380,000 or so?
That was the 380 is the median sale price for Ossipee homes.
Okay, the cost for these projected units. I'm questioning how that owner would be able to sell. Let's say they stay there 10 years and then they want to sell. At what price would the resale value be determined, and who would profit from that sale if it was an appreciation?
This is done as a pure market transaction. So we were calculating that they would be selling those homes at that price because they would get the return that the developer is looking for. But aside, we did not place any restrictions on these aside from primary residency. So on the market rate. So theoretically, someone could buy the home and then they could try to sit there and flip it if they wanted to. We didn't. So again, this is open market. It's a free market economy. That's what we were utilizing. We didn't include any sort of subsidy that would trigger anything like that. We also did not consider that this would be done by any sort of mission-driven organization that would attempt to regulate resale values. So for the market rate homes.
So assuming someone owned, let's say I bought a unit and I was there for 10 years and I decided I needed to sell or I had to sell or die or something, the market value of that particular unit would be determined by market rates?
If it's a market value, it's sold at market rate.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, though, he's not speaking about the workforce units. This is just the ones that are being sold at market value. No, they're all for purchase. The ones that are designated at market value. The other ones would have a deed restriction.
There's one other figure we've left out of this. So if somebody buys the house and they're renting and now they're transitioning into buying a house, they get the same federal subsidy that we've all gotten, anybody who's ever bought a house. You get a tax deduction on your interest rates. So that comes out to, several $1,000s a year. So it's a positive for the buyer. When as soon as you become a homeowner, you get certain kind of privileges that renters don't get, and that's a tax break. So keep that in mind too. That's another savings for anybody who buys the house.
I just want to say one quick thing. I'm the board chair. I am the board chair of the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition. I just want to take one public moment we're thankful to have been invited to do this first and foremost. And I wanted to thank those who are here. That this has been an incredible experience for me personally, and just to observe the discourse and to be part of it, and to see a community get this involved has been really special for me to just participate in that, and to see the same faces 3 nights in a row is incredible as well. Many of the same faces, not just the politicians, but the community as well. 3 nights in a row, and I especially want to thank those who participated in the event, both board members and people who took time out of their lives to participate in this. And I wish you could have all been fly on the wall. Is that the expression? To observe what happened today specifically. The amount of I'm tired, and I'm a realtor, so I am very low on the evolutionary ladder of this group. So I did a lot of sitting back observing, but I got to watch what they did all day. And it's incredible the amount of calculating that happened and the amount of work that went into this. So I just want to thank everyone publicly for participating. And it's so appreciated, and I hope it was valuable for the people who attended.
Damon Steer, Conway Daily Sun. A couple questions. One is, one idea that came out of the listening sessions that I hope the delegation and the commissioners don't lose track of is the safe parking area, because I know there's a lot of homeless people on private land, and they don't necessarily have a safe place to go or a place that they won't get kicked out of. So I think maybe at some point, and it's not the purview of you guys here, but it would be for the commissioners and the delegation to look at. And then secondly, what about energy efficiency of the homes?
I think when we priced them out, we included everything as being with heat pumps, predominantly electric use. We had bandied about the idea of using some of the free space as a solar farm that could then give renewable credits to the whole development, reducing their overall electric costs, which would bring their utility costs down. But the more you start talking about like net zero construction and things like that, you start getting into higher construction costs, and that then makes it less affordable. So we kind of went for a middle road there.
I think one of the benefits of how we envision this is that these places, one, get built with no public money, other than the county potentially giving it to a developer for free. So you've got the people buying the market rate units who are subsidizing the, say, 25% of the workforce units. So you're getting those units built without any taxpayer money being spent on them. If we had put in a lot of subsidies, there are ways in which the multifamily could get built, so don't give up on that. If the increased units from this land get moved to, say, some land where there's water and sewer, now you're game on to get some multifamily units built in Ossipee. But one of the other benefits of this is you're going to be building new homes, and these new homes are going to be well built. They're going to be tightly insulated. They're going to have new windows. So you're already building something that's far better than the vast majority of the housing stock around here that's generally 100 years old. So thanks for asking about energy efficiency. That's what they would end up being.
Hi, this is David Page. First, I want to say thank you to Sarah, to Josh, to everyone on this team, to Joy, wherever Joy went, who did an incredible job with the facilitation. Thank you. I also want to say that I see this charrette as a great success because we didn't necessarily come out thinking we were going to have the project we were going to do, that the goal was always to start a conversation, to identify the barriers, to see what ways we might better leverage this public asset of the county land, which right now is just occasionally giving us some timber money and like barely anything. So how can we use this land to better meet the needs of the people of Carroll County? And I think it even exceeded my expectations because I think it has started a bigger conversation about housing and brought people together to discuss it and really dive deep and see how incredibly challenging these problems are. I mean, even just what Damon mentioned about the safe parking area, these are bigger conversations as a community that we need to be having. So that's my thank you and my applause. My question here as a legislator is I think everybody was really grooving with the beginning of this presentation, right? We were like, all right, we see how this could happen, how we could use this land. And then it was when we saw what capital A affordable meant for people in our community and what those prices looked like for buying the homes. So as a legislator, I see that and I say, what are the missing ingredients legislatively to make that look different? So my question that I pose to this group is, can the state of New Hampshire be doing something different to get the cost of those homes down for people? And I would love to hear your recommendations on that as I hopefully head back to Concord again.
That is a fantastic question, and I wish that our our colleague Ryan was still with us, who has spent a lot of time on similar legislation in Maine and could speak more cogently to some of the things they have done. But there's two different factors, right? When it comes to multifamily, it's really important to understand that the majority of funding available to a nonprofit who wants to do that is the low-income housing tax credit. That is a fully objective system that really favors large-scale development. Typically, if you want to do a low-income housing tax credit development, you need at least 25 units, ideally 30 or 40 units. A lot of communities feel that does not fit within the aesthetic of their community. There is not really an appropriate place in their community for that to fit, or you don't have the infrastructure. So I know that there are other rural states that have put together state programs that fund more like 8 to 15 unit multifamily developments and provide a state tax credit program to fund that level of development. And it has been wildly impactful in rural parts of rural states, which is what New Hampshire is. Another one would be the single family piece. Obviously, we do so much talking at the state level about land use reform and land use change that is largely targeting multifamily housing. When we look at the studies done by New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, the majority of units that we're short on are ownership units. They're homes, not apartments. I think it's something like 70% of all folks in the state own, not rent. So really, if you're trying to target the most need is that we need homes, and especially since the early 2000s, we have, and not even 2008, prior to that, we've seen a massive drop in the amount of building permits issued for single family and multifamily homes. So we're not building homes at a rate that people are wanting to get them, and that's, again, part of why you see a stagnation in the purchase market and why prices are starting to inflate. And so having some sort of program at the state level that is going to incentivize people to build starter homes, because we just showed you the numbers of what it looks like for a private developer to do it, and a lot of you said that doesn't seem reasonable. Those are the numbers. So if you want it to come in lower than that, you're going to likely need a program that is going to incentivize a developer to do that. And with that comes all of the pieces we were talking about. no short-term rental, make sure there's a calculation for resale so it stays affordable. All of those things get balled into programs like that and help perpetuate that affordability through multiple iterations of sale to multiple families. So having a program of that nature, I'm working with a national level consultant right now who does specifically that type of development around the country. And they said to me, does New Hampshire have a program for that? And I said, no. And they said, okay, this is probably not going to work, but we're going to keep going anyway because I'm paying them. They said where you see those being most successful for nonprofits are in the states where there is a program supporting it. So if New Hampshire saw it in its heart to do that, it would help us immensely.
So this is my ask, I guess, and I know that you're in Conway, so you've seen the same thing. But in our community in the Lakes region, one of the reasons we don't have starter homes anymore is because over the last few years, people have purchased all our starter homes that normally turn over in 5 or 6 years minimum. And then it goes to the next family and the next family. Well, a lot of people have come in and they've purchased them up as their second and their third home. And they've built them up very quickly. So the zoning isn't stopping that quick buildup of those starter homes. And then they're keeping them, and because they're larger homes now, they're passing them down in their family in their second and third homes. So I know a big part of the Lakes region, part of the problems we're having is the second and third homes, but also the short-term rentals. So starter homes, they're not out there because they've been built up and built on. So maybe there's some way to do legislation to stop second and third people who are buying their second and their third homes from building onto those starter homes and having a 5-year, stop on them. Like, you bought that home, you can't build onto it for 5 years. And then those starter homes will stay in the market more to turnover. So some of the zoning would be helpful if we suppress some of the building of taking our starter homes.
And David, just very quickly, there's a lot of good tools out there right now for housing. There's a lot of different ways you can amend your zoning ordinance, and we have some great organizations at a state level too that provide those. But I think for a lot of planning boards, that's a lot to interpret. It's a lot to understand how a certain tool is going to affect the community. What does higher density look like? How do I go after grants for water and sewer? And if there were resources that could directly give the tools to the planning boards for consultants or the regional planning commissions to help, I think that would be really beneficial to really understand how they can utilize those and how it might change the community.
This is Damon Steer again with another kind of pie in the sky idea. I mean, I was thinking about ways to put up just beds in housing in the sort of the cheapest way you could probably do it. And it probably wouldn't be but what about like a college dorm sort of situation where you get like a bed and a room, maybe a hot plate if you're lucky, or like shared kitchens or something, or even a commercial kitchen that might be staffed, but just something like Mountain View. In other words, you just get kind of a bed and that's pretty much it. And then your kitchen situation might be communal or shared between different floors. I don't know, but is that even... I don't think I'd live through that again at 45, however old I am.
So has anybody thought about that? I know there's kind of a movement in that direction.
We started a conversation about manufactured homes, and we looked into cost per square foot of construction there versus cost a square foot here. The availability of people who are doing those homes that could get them to us in a reasonable amount of time and at a reasonable cost. We went through all of that as I'll say brief. It wasn't a brief conversation, but it was a brief portion of today. And so we ended up having to, because of the time limitations, we ended up having to navigate to some assumed construction costs to get ourselves to kind of a window of construction costs to be able to just start doing the math on on the overall costs. And we were really crunching the numbers all the way down to just before everybody walked in on the costs. Like it was working, then it wasn't working, then it was working, then it wasn't working, and we forgot this, and it took a lot of effort. So we had to make some broad brush assumptions pretty quickly, but we did have a brief conversation about manufactured homes.
And I just want to add, in New Hampshire, manufactured homes are considered real estate, unlike in many other states where they're considered chattel or personal property. So manufactured homes and co-ops and things of that nature really are an excellent solution to some of our affordable housing problems. But what's really important for everybody to understand is there's no one solution. So it might be some manufactured homes here, and it might be a multifamily or two over here, and homes for purchase over there, and some deed-restricted properties over here. 2,500 properties is a lot of properties. That's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. So this is excellent conversation. Oh, and let's not forget the ADUs that have gotten, I haven't seen a lot of traction, but they've gotten looser in zoning with ADUs, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see that begin to impact our market as well. So excellent thought.
And I just want to comment too to that manufactured housing as well, because I know that there can be a lot of confusion because there's a difference between manufactured housing and a modular home. And if we're talking manufactured housing, such as a mobile home, like a mobile home in a park, I know a lot of people think that that is the affordable way to go. But when you're actually trying to purchase a property like that, it requires a lot of money down, especially if it's in a park or a co-op. And then you look at the additional association fees, it gets you out of that affordable factor really quickly. And it's really disappointing to see because the purchase price looks really great. And I have a lot of conversations with buyers who are like, well, this is the only thing in my price range. And I said, I know, it's heartbreaking, but you need the 20% down and your park rent is $520. And so, plus, yeah.
Those can be financeable through New Hampshire Housing and Fannie Mae on the secondary market because in New Hampshire they are real estate. We can't do that in Maine. We can't do that in Massachusetts. So that is a unique one leg up that we have. But
it's just very particular.
Again, it's pigeonholed, and so it's just one of many solutions.
I would like to share my experience because I was looking for a home and a mobile home, like recently, mobile homes. And the point too is that when you're trying to finance them, you have to pay it off in 15 years instead of 30. So if you see, and you'll see that they do have mobile homes right now that are going for $250,000. Now try to cut that down to 15 years that you're paying that off instead of 30. And then you're right, if you have to pay for your park rent or whatever, that goes on top of it. So you're turning it into like a $2,000 payment every month to live in a mobile home that has no equity. So it's an option, but it's got a lot to it.
Unfortunately, I think that there's no good time to stop, but we are about 7:30 tonight, and the design team has been here since 8 a.m., so I do have to release them. And I very much appreciate all of you staying so late to talk about this. There's obviously more that we all want to say, and I would really encourage you to reach out to us at MWVHC.org. Get in touch. Let's all become housing advocates together. Follow us on Facebook. There's more to this conversation, and we'd love to continue it on.